Well, Lance Armstrong will find out tomorrow whether the International Cycling Union will officially strip him of his 7 Tour de France titles. Cycling's governing body has called a press conference in Geneva when it's expected to announce the decision.
It comes about 10 days after the United States Anti-Doping Agency released a 1,000-page report alleging Armstrong was the ringleader of a major doping conspiracy. For more, our sports reporter Sasha Mirzabegian is speaking to Richard Ings, who was the former head of the Australian Sports Anti-Doping Agency from 2005 to 2010.
Richard Ings, good morning to you.
Good morning, Sasha.
Now, you were the chairman of ASADA since its creation from about 2006, but you left the role about 18 months ago. During that time, did you have any suspicions about the depth of doping in cycling?
Well, Sasha, cycling is a sport that within Australia and around the world has been afflicted by doping for quite some time. And there have been many Australian cyclists as well, going back many years, who have been found to have been involved in doping violations. So it is a high-risk sport, and the announcements about Lance Armstrong do not surprise me at all.
OK, cycling itself has copped a bad rap in recent weeks about the rampant use of EPO or blood doping. Now, Armstrong himself has never tested positive, even though the tests are quite stringent. Can we be sure other athletes in other sports aren't outsmarting the system?
Well, one of the things that we all need to recognise is that testing and testing alone is not the magic bullet that will detect every athlete involved in doping. There are ways and means that athletes can get around testing. So that is why this USADA investigation involves so-called non-analytical evidence, financial transactions, emails, witness testimony, to build a compelling case against Lance Armstrong, and that's the way to fight doping in sport going forward.
You say there are ways and means to get around it. What do you mean by that?
Well, testing will detect the presence of a prohibited substance in the body, but when an athlete is taking that banned substance, it can sometimes clear the body literally in a matter of hours between taking the injection and the test taking place. So unless you're right there when the athlete is taking the substance, you will not get a positive test. So you can't rely on testing exclusively to be able to catch everybody involved in doping in sport.
But how accurate is this test for EPO? I mean, is it something that needs to be worked on?
Well, the test for EPO is very accurate. In fact, there's a urine test for EPO and there's a blood test as well for other variants of EPO. The issue is not the test itself. The issue is the window of detection. That's the length of time between the athlete taking the substance and the test being performed. It can be as short as 3 to 4 hours, which is why these days it's also very important to store samples, to freeze them long term, to go back as technology and testing improves in the future to retest them.
So generally speaking, how long after competition does the test need to be taken?
Well, look, Sasha, to be honest with you, it varies significantly by substance, but for a product like EPO, it would really need to take place probably within about 12 hours of the substance being injected by the athlete to be assured of getting a positive test.
Yeah, but then how long before competition does the athlete need to inject EPO in order to take full advantage?
Well, what was happening in the case of the Lance Armstrong brief put together by USADA was that those athletes were involved in so-called microdosing. So they weren't taking full doses of EPO, detectable for even several days prior, but they were taking microdoses which will clear the body in literally a matter of hours. It simply points out the limitations of testing and the need to have other forms of investigating doping violations.
Now, we speak of high-profile athletes doping. You know, they're role models for younger semi-professional athletes. Is there a strong probability that, you know, these semi-pro athletes are wetting their beaks too?
I'm sorry, mate, I didn't catch that question.
I'm just said that semi-professional athletes look up to these pro athletes like Lance Armstrong. Is there a strong probability that these semi-pro athletes are wetting their beaks too in doping?
Well, absolutely. In fact, if you go to the website for the Australian Customs and Border Protection Service, you'll see that there are literally thousands of interdictions of banned performance-enhancing substances coming into Australia through airports and shipping channels every year. So these are substances not just used by elite professional athletes, but absolutely they've filtered their way down to some of the lowest levels in semi-professional and even amateur sport.
So accessibility is a problem too?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you go to the internet and you type in EPO or steroids or human growth hormone, there are ways and means that you can purchase these products. But fortunately here in Australia, with the Australian Sports Anti-Doping Authority working with Customs, working with agencies of law enforcement, and now working with the Australian Crime Commission, there are significant barriers to people purchasing and importing these prohibited substances now.
Now, Lance Armstrong came to Australia to ride in the Tour of Adelaide. Were you a bit sketchy about him coming down, and were there any suspicions at the time?
Oh, look, I mean, the sport of cycling, full stop, has suspicions about it. More than one third of the peloton in the Tour de France in the last 5 years or so has been implicated or found guilty of being involved in doping. So the Tour Down Under in Australia was viewed as a high-risk sporting event, and it had significant testing resources and the storage of urine samples thrown at it.
Now, some are saying, why don't we just decriminalise doping in sport? Then we might actually get genuine results. What do you say to that?
Well, there's one very, very significant problem with that view, and that problem is that people die. These are substances which will assist people who have severe medical problems, but individuals who are otherwise healthy, who are taking EPO, who are taking steroids and prohibited substances, who are taking human growth hormone, are risking very, very serious and indeed life-threatening health consequences. They have no place in sport at the professional level or at the amateur level at all. Well,
they're doing that anyway, aren't they, Richard? Then wouldn't it be better if we have some sort of body overseeing the administering of these drugs?
Well, I've got kids. I don't want my kids injecting human growth hormone and EPO and steroids as 15, 16-year-olds to be able to compete at their high school sports carnival. No, these substances have absolutely no place in sport. They're a significant health risk. They are committing sporting fraud, and the public is looking for fair and clean and open and honest and healthy competition.
Now, just lastly now, I'll leave you with this. Richard Ings, the former head of ASADA. Is legal action the only way to go? We've seen all these former cyclists going under oath and giving evidence. Do the authorities need to get together and make a joint uniform approach to this whole thing?
Well, look, I think that we have reached the point now in the fight against doping in sport where one of the common features of the USADA investigation of Lance Armstrong and also Balco, going back several years ago, was that testimony given under oath prompted individual athletes to finally come forward, break the code of silence and tell the truth. With the threat of going to jail for perjury, athletes who have kept their secrets for years come forward and tell the truth. And this is what has happened in the case of Lance Armstrong. And maybe the time has now come in Australian sport and also in international sport to revisit this question about compulsory witness statements under oath with the threat of perjury for lying.
Richard Ings, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for your time this morning, and no doubt we will be in touch with you in the near future.
It's a pleasure, Sasha, anytime.
Thank you.